inevitably situations arise where there may be conflict among your team members, and that may impact the productivity of the team. So I was asking people for some examples and how to deal with that situation. So I'll start off with that first. I mean, I think that we all know, we heard it while we were at the GSB, that, diversity is why we're all here. And inevitably you will get people with diverse opinions, but you will also get situations where styles may rub other people on the team the wrong way. Now, most of the time this is not a big deal because this is a volunteer thing and most people don't take themselves that seriously. But, people can get pretty passionate about this. This is something everyone's doing with their free time. So Professor Maggie Neal did a whole session on this at our last training, and I do recommend that if you have a chance that you take a look at her presentation on the web. But I think the best thing to do to deal with the situation is that everyone on the team needs to take some responsibility for taking care of other people on the team. So if you notice that someone is being really quiet or consistently cannot be heard on the team, make a point of saying, gee, we haven't heard from, Lauren. So try to make sure, be aware of that, because you're always going to have a situation where certain people are going to be more dominant than other folks on the team. And, the way to make sure that people don't end up feeling marginalized and dropping off the team in the worst case, because it does happen, is to make sure that everyone pays attention to what's going on during team meetings, and even if it means taking a time out and speaking to someone one-on-one offline. So that's my best recommendation. It's the same advice I would give to any kind of team situation, and it's even more critical in a volunteer situation. So David's going to kick off the next answer for us. ACT teams sometimes experience what we call the slump in the middle, where the project kind of seems to lose momentum. I mean, this typically is a 6-month project. Some projects go on for much longer. And so David, can you give us some ideas on kind of how to keep the team going during these periods of time?
We've already talked about how important it is to clearly identify what you're going to try to do and to get a commitment from the client as to their commitment of time. And if you have those things in place, I think that is really going to help you move through and avoid a slump. I think it's important to keep timelines short. My experience working with business school alums is that they can do pretty well for a short period of time, but if you try to do something that goes 9 months or a year and a half, other things intervene, all kinds of things, personal work and so on. So what I like to see is short timelines that are doable, and being clear on exactly what the deliverables are for each of the team members. My sense of this is that somebody who's not getting the work done in 2 weeks is not going to get the work done if you give them 2 more weeks. So if you're having somebody who's having problems keeping up with the group, sit down with them one-on-one, find out what's going on, and have a heart-to-heart on whether or not it's viable for them to continue. I also like to see overlapping skill sets on teams, so that if somebody is not able to work at the rate that they thought they could, you have somebody who can pick up things, and that can avoid a slump because you actually don't have the whole dip because of one team member.
I guess one thing I'd say is probably it's good to have what happens is sometimes there's a flurry of activity and then you're waiting for something to happen. You may be waiting. Oftentimes you end up doing surveys, and it takes some time for people to respond and for you to understand whether they're ready to talk to you or to get responses back as well. I've had 2 projects where that's happened. And you're sort of saying, okay, you're kind of waiting for the data, you're not sure what to do, and the team can lose a lot of energy doing that. And I think it's kind of useful to maintain some contact. It's easy to sort of say, oh, we'll just wait till we hear back, and then the energy of the team can kind of die down. To even if it's for a half-an-hour conference call every week, to kind of keep that up and just say, has anyone had any other thoughts? Have we done any secondary research or in any other area that might have some bearing upon this, apart from the surveys or whatever data we're waiting for? So to find some way to use the time usefully still, I think that can help.
Yeah, and just to amplify your point, I think it's important to continue to have regular meetings, and hopefully in your project plan, you've designed some backup tasks so that when there is that kind of lull in the project, that there's some research that can still be done or some interviews that can be conducted. Try to overlap those tasks so you don't get a situation where you're just waiting for data. Okay, so this is a kind of a key question. I'm going to have David kick this one off. During the course of a project, sometimes someone chooses to either drop off the team or stop showing up for an extended period of time. Can you give us an example of where this happened and what your suggestions are on dealing with it?
I can give you an example of where this happened. It was in the project that we just finished for the Oakland Zoo. In the middle of the project, the Oakland Zoo hired one of our team members as their COO. I never saw ACT as a job placement agency, but it worked for Vince. So what did we do? Well, it was actually kind of interesting because it was a bit of one of those things where the board consistently has wanted ACT involved with the zoo to try to get the executive director what they don't have the guts to tell him to do. And I think that you'll find the ACT teams brought in innocently in many cases with hidden agendas on the part of the board, on the part of the ED trying to fire the board, or to bring about some other change that they can't seem to do in a more straightforward way. In our case, what we did is we stopped communicating with Vince. Because we felt that we were going to be talking to them about things that might be controversial, and we wanted the chance to talk to the leadership of the organization first. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, what I talked about before of having some overlapping skills, we had a second team member who was a great number cruncher, and Vince and she had been doing wonderful analysis of the historical trends and what would happen if they kept going the way they were, which, as I mentioned before, would be out of business. And so she picked up the pace, and she took over, and we finished off the project. Now, I do hope that our plan is being instituted in a way the Oakland Zoo hadn't instituted our 3 previous projects for them, because we got our guy there. So I'm interested to check back and see how it's worked out.
Any other comments? That's probably a more unusual situation.
Very unusual. I think more often what happens is personal situations come up. We had a team member once who had an accident. There's nothing something can do. You can't do anything about that, and you're out of commission for a month. And what do you do? And one of the things that helps is actually team sizes. Sometimes it is unmanageable to have the agendas of everybody line up when you have 16 members, but it's nice for those situations when they do, get pregnant or have to move away, or, something like that happens where a personal situation comes up. So what I found generally is that, what you find is most of the team members are willing to just take on a little bit extra. In the case where you have very specialized tasks, then yes, you're hoping you have backup, because otherwise you're screwed. But you can always come to April and ask her for another person, or to get some extra help. I think that's another thing you can do. It's a little tricky because if it happens midway in the project, there's so much learning that has gone on that it can be challenging. But that's one place where having a team, more 5-6 members or so, does help, where you can take up some of the slack of the work. And often what happens is, at least the couple of times it's happened with me, the team member, when they come back, are more than willing to put in an extra effort towards the end, so then the other people can relax a little bit. That's what tends to happen mostly.
My recommendation for a team leader, when someone, I've been most familiar with the flake, someone just doesn't show up for a couple meetings, is for a team leader to directly address it. Find out what's going on, and then tell everyone else, this person's not showing up because of this. Because it's not great for morale when, geez, you're waiting 15 minutes. Is he going to show this time? It's sort of a downer to start every meeting on, is this person going to be here? So just address it.
Yeah, and actually that's something that I recommend all the project leaders do, especially in the first meeting, is find out, what people's commitment really I mean, do they have the stamina for a 4 to 6 month project, and kind of establish that right away, because it's different when there's an accident, but often people really have planned absences, and make sure you find out. We had a team member who was studying for the bar, so we knew we were going to lose her at some point in the project. We had another situation where, we had someone who probably didn't remember his class year, who was a gray hair, and he was a very valuable member of the project, but he made it very clear that he only had, 2 months, and that he was going to be, on an extended vacation in Europe after that. So we really took advantage of him in the first 2 months. And, I think that's fine. You just need to be realistic. This is a volunteer kind of thing. And so, be upfront about it. Communicate really clearly with your project leader if you're going to be out, if there's some emergency at work, what have you, so that your project leader and the rest of the team can try to balance the remaining tasks, and you can still have a good project and a good result for your client. So the project leader role does involve quite a bit of extra work. And so the question I have for the panel is, what can your team do, for all the project leaders out there, what can your team do to make your life easier? And Jan offered to start that.
I'll repeat something you said earlier. I think you said earlier, Sin, which is at that first team meeting when you're sort of dividing up into sub-teams, telling the team leader, telling the whole group, these are things that I have experience doing, these are things I want to get experience doing, these are things I know that I'm bringing to the team. So that, just as your example, David, with, you had 2 people working on data and 1 dropped off, you still had 1 doing that. Just that redundancy, I think, would be the biggest recommendation I'd have about making a project leader's life easier.
I think it's very similar to what we do elsewhere as community volunteers. Show up. So if you agree to be on the team, come to all the meetings, make an extraordinary effort, do your negotiations with your family and your workplace beforehand so that you can show up and make the most. Nothing's worse than having a team meeting and half the people aren't there. And then do the work. So if you agree to take a task on, do it in a timely fashion, and then contribute ideas. So bring yourself, try to carve out the time for it, and bring all of yourself when you are in those meetings. And it sounds pretty fundamental, but I would say that every team leader, if they had those 3 things happen, it would go very smoothly.
I can't reiterate that enough, actually, in terms of doing stuff, doing the work and coming to the meeting prepared. So if there's something to be discussed, then make sure you've read the material or done the work that's required. That to make sure it's really difficult sometimes to find that 1 hour in the week or 2 hours that everybody can meet from their busy lives, and you don't want to really spend that sort of updating people on what's happened, and be there on time. That's the other thing. Every 10 minute counts. So if you're meeting around lunchtime, get your lunch before you come to the meeting. It helps. It's little stuff like that. And then the other thing that can help is actually some sense of rotating responsibilities. In terms of, if we're taking notes, it's easier for everybody, I think, if that's on some sort of a rotating basis. So one person is not always doing the more kind of routine work of just note-taking, setting up meetings, whatever it might be. So sometimes that works and helps as well with the team.
The only thing I would add is something I just said earlier, which was about clear communication. So yes, the best thing for you to do is to show up, do what you committed to do. But if you can't, because life happens, make sure you let your team leader know that you're not going to be doing what you were assigned, and make sure you let your project leader know as soon as possible, so that your project leader has an opportunity to reassign the task and to try to deal with that. The recommendation I would have to project leaders, of course, is to build in redundancy, build some slack in, so that there is that capacity to take over if somebody has some, emergency business meeting, they have to fly off somewhere and just will not be able to come through on something. But clear communication is really, really important. Don't leave it till the next meeting to say, oh, gee, I didn't do it.